So we're going to be talking about something which I think is some people might feel sort of quite intimidated by. I think like this whole idea of like being a values-led organization and how to achieve values-led first principles and all this type of like stuff. I think certainly for me anyway, I think it can be quite intimidating and could be quite off-putting for a lot of people. So yeah, definitely, 100%. Because uh, I feel like it's a massive task is the first thing, but also I feel like it's a task which um, I guess I guess you can easily get wrong. That's what I feel like.
Do you? Okay. Yeah, no, fair. That is a fair point. It is a big task. It comes down to culture, right? Okay. So your culture is the sort of the sum total of the way that people act and behave within your business. And that's there anyway. You know, you have a company culture. There is a company culture in every single organization. And it's just how much you can influence that culture through, I suppose, defining what it looks like and what you'd like it to be, and then examining the behaviors that people are, how people are acting on a day-to-day basis. And it can, yeah, I get it actually. It can feel really confusing if you first look at it, because I think there's a lot of confusion tied up in, you know, purpose, values, mission, vision, all these words, and people think, oh, what's the difference between a mission and a vision and a purpose and and a strategy, and they all feel like words that we should all know exactly what they are, but actually they sort of can mean anything to anybody. And there's no real definition of any of them. It's just what different organizations have adopted. So the first thing I'd say is that actually you can make it quite simple. That doesn't mean that it's not a challenge to implement values and to get a clear purpose and values running through your business, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And we actually would say sort of forget about vision and mission, and just look at, why are people getting up in the morning to work for you? And, so the purpose is your why. Why are you here? What are you doing? So, for example, Carero's purpose is better conversations, better careers, better lives. So a purpose should be an old tweet size, a tweet size statement. It should be something that's easily memorable. It certainly shouldn't be full of corporate language. And a purpose is very much around a parameter of how we do things here. It's your reason to be. And if you can get that right and people know what it is, they can be quite inspiring. So, I mean, the one that I love the best is Virgin Airlines, which is to embrace the human spirit and let it fly. It works sort of across lots of levels. And, if you're a team member and you come to work in an organization and it's like, our purpose is to embrace the human spirit and let it fly, it does what it says on the tin, right? But it's bigger than we put people in planes and get them to where they want to be. It evokes an emotional response in you. Another one I like is Alzheimer's Association, which is a world without Alzheimer's disease, which is very aspirational. That's a really aspirational purpose. That's something that everybody that works in that charity will be getting up every morning to really think about how we do it. TED is spread ideas, super simple. But if I work for TED, I know what I'm going for every morning. So, if you're very, very clear on your purpose, that's giving people in the organization, a really good reason to want to come and work with you. And look, in hospitality, we know that engagement and retention can be an issue and it can be a challenge. And actually, overall, only 9% of people in the UK are engaged with work. And one of the ways which you really can engage people is to sort of be very, very clear about what you stand for as a business and what your purpose is. So if your purpose is why you're here, then your values are what's important to us. So they are, in our old business, we used to have 8. It's too many, but it was a mnemonic and we remembered them and we worked really hard. But, between 3 and 5. So again, at Carrero, ours are, we're credible, we care, and we're positive. And everything that we do, whenever we're making decisions, when we're, if we were recruiting somebody, If we're talking to them about how they're performing, it would be against those values, and that's where Carrera comes in. So, there's been a lot of times where we've gone to organizations and we've asked them, what does good look like here? What do you stand for? And an organization that's ready to use Carrera, I would expect them to say, oh, we have a really strong set of values and behaviors that underpin them. And that's how we measure part of performance. The other part is having really clear goals. There was a piece of research done quite recently, I think, with Vodafone, that showed that 22% more performance conversations happened when people have very clear goals and also then have performance conversations through coaching. And you do have to be very clear on, what good looks like. And that's where the values come in. And they have to be simple. They have to be authentic, genuine and meaningful. It's building up them as part of your DNA. The worst thing to do is for people to sit around in a boardroom, pick 3 words that they like, post them on a wall somewhere and say, hey, here are our values. That's more damaging than not having them in the first place, because it screams inauthenticity. So deciding what your values are is 10% of the work. Embedding in them in the organization is then 90%. And then, it shouldn't be something that everybody's scared into, oh, now we need to remember the values. We need to remember the values. But when you walk in somewhere, you really should be able to feel, I hope when people come across us at Carrera, they think, oh yeah, if you have a conversation with me, you hopefully would come away thinking, oh, she's really positive. She's really credible, and she obviously cares about what she's doing, because I absolutely live and breathe those values within the business. So wow, I went on a bit there, didn't I?
No, it's super. I think there's a couple of things which I guess make it. Yeah, there's probably 3 things that come to mind which make it like a bit of a scary topic for me. I think the first thing is all these big words that you've just kind of explained to us what the difference is, mission and values and all that. That's the first thing. I think that's the intimidating bit for a lot of people.
So forget about that. Why are we here? What's important to us, and how do we deliver that? So imagine a triangle, and at the top you've got why are we here? In the middle, it's like what's important, our values, and underpinning that are the behaviors. Yeah. So each of those values, so for example, for us, we're credible, we deliver what we say we will deliver. And that's how I'm measured. That's how we measure each other. So if, what does credibility mean in our organization? Because it has to be unique to us. I can't even tell you how many people would say, oh, passion, teamwork, and it's just like, no, yes, obviously you need to be excited and passionate about your work, but you can't tell people to be that. That's an output, and it's a cliche. Whereas, really thinking about what makes you different, what makes you stand out. I know that being a tech business, being credible is really important to me, and also probably a bit of a USP, if I'm honest. The same as care. We go over and above for our clients, and we have the privilege to be able to do that because we're such a small business. A lot of tech businesses can't do that because by the very nature of the commercial model, they have to outsource their customer care, and you end up in a help desk situation or a ticketing system. And we're small enough not to have to do that. So I can genuinely, hand on heart, say that our customers will all tell us that they care. And that's because that's one of our values. And as we grow, either our values will have to change, or we'll have to find a way of doing it so we can still reflect that. So yeah, I can understand why it seems scary, but if you're very clear on why you're here, which I think most founders, if you ask them, would have a really good idea about what that is. The challenge is, how do you get everybody living and breathing that? And you can really see it when founder-led businesses grow, and they'll be at 4 or 5 sites, and they can be in everywhere. And the culture will be amazing because it will be exactly what that founder wanted to be. And that founder will be living and breathing it. And they'll know every single person in the organization. And they won't have to write it down anywhere because it will just be. And I think the biggest challenge we come up across is people going, no, but if you write it down, it becomes, it's a process then, and we don't want to be a process organisation, and we want to be authentic, and we want everyone to be living their best lives and being their best selves. And that's great, but how do you model that over time? Pret are one of the main examples. When Pret were good, were like really good, you'd go into every single Pret and you'd have a completely consistent service because they were so clear about why they were here. They were clear what's important, and everybody in those teams totally understood the behaviours that they needed to live on a day-to-day basis to be a Pret person, and they bought into it. It's when people want to sing the company song, for want of a better word, rather than roll their eyes and feel like it's cringy. So the worst thing to do is have a culture where everyone's like, oh, here we go, caring or whatever it might be, because somebody in HR has told them that's what they've got to do. So, with a founder-led business in hospitality, you can feel the point at which it grows to the size where your founder can't be in every single site. And therefore now you're reliant on whoever's heading up that site. So now you're reliant on your GMs to be making sure that that magic that you created in sites 1, 2, 3, and 4 is still alive in site 10 without you having to be there the whole time. And the only way to do that is to set the expectation right from the get-go, from the moment you post a job advert, to say, this is what we stand for. If you come and work here, this is what we expect from you. Everybody needs to have their expectations set. And I think people are sometimes scared to have conversations, certainly post-COVID, when, there was a massive a massive recruitment issue. People were scared to say, to work here, this is how we want you to behave, because it was just like, are you warm? Are you breathing? Come in. But how damaging that has been to some organisational cultures is ridiculous, because suddenly they've lost all sense of, actually, this is what we stand for.
Yeah, 100%. I've not really thought about that effect on culture before. It's kind of been diluted a little bit, hasn't it? I think the other thing, which I think is maybe the scary part for businesses, is that it's a bit of a paradox, because it's like I think a lot of people I speak to, certainly, maybe they're said to be too small for Carrero, but they're maybe just going to that level where Carrero would be useful for them. They haven't sat down and gone through the exercise of writing down their values or thinking really clearly about them. And maybe they're thinking, oh, I'll put it off because it's going to take a long time, and they're just not doing it. But what you said earlier on is so true. They're already, you're always creating a culture, and you're always putting some values in, whether you mean to or not.
Yeah.
So that's quite a paradox, really, because it's like people are saying, oh, well, I don't want to spend the time to do it purposefully, but they're doing it
anyway. You've got a culture. You walk into any organisation, there's a culture. Yeah, that's it. And when you're quite small, it's the best time to do it, because you will have some people in the business and you'll know who they are. You'll know, let's take, I don't know, let's take an example. I don't want to give real life examples. Let's take a pretend multi-site operator, and you're a site 4. You know already who are the people in that business that live and breathe your business. You know who your good performers are. That's not necessarily the people that sell the most. That's the people that have got behind whatever your purpose is, whatever the reason for being is, and are just living it and delivering it without you telling them how. They just are. They just believe in you because you're this great founder, and you've, come up with this brilliant idea, and it's starting to really take off. And, we would always say, that we've got a piece of survey technology as well. And we would always say, at that point, it's really good to ask people, what's good about working here? What are the top 3 things? What are the things that make us special? Because often as a founder, you can get a little bit lost about what you want to be happening versus what's really happening. And we find that a lot. So the consultancy business that I've got alongside Carrero, we would go in and we would ask people, what's important to them about coming to work here? What are the best things about being here? And then we would work with the founders to sit down and understand, okay, you might want it to be X, Y, Z, but actually this is what people are telling you, and probably it's somewhere in the middle. So we would always say that purpose and values probably shouldn't be done just by people sitting in a room, unless you're really, really early stages, in which case it definitely should be. But if it's the first time you thought about it and you're going to be imposing it on people, you need to get their buy-in right from the beginning. Because if you're having a purposeful culture from the beginning is very different from trying to change a culture, and the culture already exists. So if you're doing it and you've already got employees, then you're going to be changing your culture, unless it's absolutely perfect as it is and it's just about defining it. Either way, we would want to talk to people in the organisation, not just, it wouldn't necessarily just come from the founder.
So would you recommend people got input on the values from their team, or what level of team? The whole team?
We would survey. We sometimes survey. We do focus groups. But yeah, you can just go around and ask people what's good about being here, and just get them to jot it down. Because often, again, when you're there every day, you might not realise that everybody in the organisation, because of the types of people you've employed, you might be employing, people that are following in your footsteps, if you like, and their behaviours are all the same, but you might not necessarily know what they are. It might be that everybody that you're employing is really empathetic, or everybody you're employing is really compassionate, and that just becomes part of who you are as a business. It's hard to say without every client we work with is completely different, and I suppose that's the thing about doing the exercise, is that you start to really understand what's going on in your own business, and start to examine a bit more about the behaviours that are sitting underneath the stuff that's happening. And embedding it has to, and that's where Carrera comes in, but it has to happen across the whole employee experience, across the whole life cycle. You can't just say, these are our values and, do them. You have to be checking in, how can we be more credible? How can we care more? How do we show up, in a positive way? And where can we improve? Because everybody can improve. And that's exactly what Carrera does, is underpin the purpose, the values and the behaviours by encouraging people to have conversations about them on a regular basis.
Yeah. So obviously in later episodes, we're going to deep dive into some of the questions that you can ask on Carrera, some of the career questions, which is going to be awesome. But just thinking a bit more sort of top level then. So let's say somebody is listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I want to go through this process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to all of my employees. Maybe I'm just going to do it sort of manually for now, or send out like a WhatsApp survey or whatever. Once they've got a whole list of answers, then what would you say would be step 2?
2 would be getting together your senior leadership team. So whoever the people are who have influence in your business. So, if you were 4 or 5 sites, I'd probably get the GMs or the managers sort of in a room almost. And then it's just about, we do it in lots of different ways. Everybody says, right, what do you think the purpose is? And you all write it down, or you go off into pairs and you do it. And then you get a whiteboard, or, old school flip chart, and you write everyone's ideas and you say, what do we like? What are the words that resonate? What makes you feel good? And everybody might sort of chip in and say, yeah, that sounds like something I like. I really don't like this bit. And so you start to just work together to come up with, a sentence or a phraseology that would make sense to you as a business. And you repeat that process until you start coming up with, okay, well, we know we definitely like this phrase. We definitely like this word. By the end of it, if you have one sentence, we tend to do it by 1 to 10, naught, I hate it, 10, I love it. If you go around the room, you want everybody at a 9 or a 10. You'll have some reflectors who might, want to be an 8 or want to go away and think about it. But it's the kind of thing where you should get a real tingle about it. Like, I've been in a room where businesses have sort of thought about their purpose. And it sounds a bit cheesy, but it's kind of magical when it happens, because everyone's suddenly like, yeah, this is why we're here, because we are going to embrace the human spirit and let it fly, or we're going to spread ideas to the whole world. And suddenly it's like, we've gone a step up. Suddenly we're not just, serving food or, having people stay over in our bedrooms. Suddenly we are, whatever it might be, the world's best hotel, whatever, the best hospitality company in the UK. It almost doesn't matter if you're 100% behind it and everyone's like, yeah, do you know what? That's what we're doing. So ours, again, better conversations, better careers, better lives. Everything we do, I'm like, yeah, talking to you now is because I want people to be having better conversations with people at work. Therefore, it will make sure that they have the best career that they could possibly want, whatever that looks like. And that gives them a better life. So suddenly I've gone from, hey, use a piece of, performance management software, to helping people have better conversations, better careers and better lives. That makes me want to get out of bed in the morning. Selling HR tech does not make me want to get out of bed in the morning. And that's the difference.
Yeah. It's a means, isn't it, to the mission, basically, to the values.
Yeah, of course. And and just being able to, it becomes very easy then to tell, at the moment, if somebody's not quite right, isn't quite working, and you can't really put your finger on it, 100% it'll be because they're not living the values of your business, whether you've articulated them or not. If you can sit down with them and say, actually, let's use the care one for us. If I've got somebody who's not being very, doesn't show care in their work, for example, and is a bit slapdash, that will bother me as a business owner. By having these values, it's very easy to me to sit down and say, actually, the way that you did that is going against what we stand for as a business. It becomes not personal. It becomes very easy. And you can very quickly see whether people are a right fit or not. And one of the things that we do on Carrero, is the first 100 days are so critical as to whether somebody will stay with you. And even more critical, whether they'll stay with you and do a good job. You've got that 100 days really where people are making up their minds. And it's through that point, those 100 days, where we should be having much more regular check-ins with people and checking back, is this person, living the values of our organisation? And, if they're not, then we should be, correcting them on it and not being afraid to have that conversation and giving them the opportunity to, to perform, to do that, to live up to the values. Because otherwise it becomes personal and, people don't, but some people just won't fit in your organisation, and that's okay. And you won't always pick that up, although you're much more likely to if you recruit to your values. And if you ask questions around that when you're recruiting and you put that in the job advert. Some people would absolutely hate to work for us because we're very, very clear on our values. Like Google, like most people would love to work for Google. I'd hate to work for Google. It doesn't, I think they're an amazing, amazing company, but their values and my values don't necessarily align. So, we would always say to people when they're looking for work, understand your own values and then match them to that of the organisations. Don't even go and look for a job somewhere where you're not clear about what you stand for and what they stand for.
Yeah. So I guess the big advantage of automating the process of implementing the values is it kind of gets over, because what I'm thinking in my head is I think there's loads of leaders who do great work setting up values but then don't really see them through. They might think, okay, job done, right? Let's send that email out to everybody. Everybody's going to sign it off. Job done. Brilliant. We'll get a plaque. We'll put it on the wall. And then because everyone's walking past it twice a day, 50 times a day even, that's it, job done. And I think we're all so busy, in hospitality, it's so busy, aren't they, that, remembering to come back to the values all the time without some sort of automation is pretty possible, I would imagine, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you know, it just has to become the way we do things here. And when I know that it's working in a business is when you overhear people, not leaders, but people saying, "Oh, we don't do it like that here." That's when we know that it's really working. But yeah, from, as I say, all the way through the employee life cycle, we should always be referring back to the values. But what gets measured gets done. So if you're sitting down with people 2-3 times a year and just chatting through, how people, are they living the behaviours? Are they living the way that we want them to be in terms of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis? Then people start to, it does, it's like, well, this is what we need to do to be here. So yeah, I don't quite know how you do it without, not necessarily automating it, but without having a process. You have to map out the employee life cycle and then think about what's underpinning it at each stage to reinforce the values. And Carrero takes care of that sort of step back, having a bigger picture. You're not going to sit down day to day. You're not going to walk in and go, "Oh, Joe, have you been very caring today?" You're not going to do that day to day. But sitting down once a quarter and sort of saying, let's discuss how you've demonstrated the care value or whatever it might be. That's when it sort of comes in its own. That said, it can't be something that's in isolation in those chats. It has to permeate everywhere. But yeah, Carrero is one of the key tools, or, I'm sure there are other performance management software available, but, I'll be biased. That's one way of doing it. But also it's not the only way, and it can't be, I think I've fallen into traps, certainly with organizations where I've helped them as part of implementing Carrero. I've helped them with their values and their behaviors. And because it hasn't been a wider piece of work, and because it's not really embedded, people think that Carrero doesn't work, but actually it's the culture of the business that, isn't supporting that process.
Tech can never do everything for you. It's got to have a certain amount of human input.
Yeah, definitely. It's only as good as the people that are using it, as long as it's, as long as it doesn't break on you every 3 seconds, obviously. But it's, we've seen it before where we've had changes in leadership teams, and, the tech will be working for years and years and years, and then there's a change in leadership, and then we're called in and it's like, this tech doesn't work for us anymore. And it's like, what's really changed? Because it's not this, it's the way that people are working, and that's fine. But it's people, I think, understanding the value, engaged. I think 9% of the UK population is engaged in their workplace. But we know that businesses with engaged people are 23% more profitable. So how do you engage people? Well, you engage them by treating them as individuals, understanding about them, all the stuff that Carrero does. And part of that is setting really clear expectations about what you expect them to deliver. People like boundaries, that's cool. If you go into work and you can just get away with anything, then how do you know? How do you know what good looks like?
So the last thing I was interested in was, we talked in a previous episode about personalization and making sure that you treated people as individuals all through their journey. And I was thinking as you were talking that, let's say you've got 5 values perhaps, and, they're all maybe on a similar theme, but they're all a bit different, and then maybe they tackle a different thing. Like, let's say you're particularly into sort of delivering like an ethical or sustainable model, for example. You might have like 4 or 5 different sort of like values around that theme. But I think you're going to get employees who are more bought into some of those rather than others. So some values rather than others. Not to say that they disagree with any values, obviously, but some of the values which may speak to certain employees more.
Yeah, so I think once you understand what the values are, again, we would have behaviours that sit underneath them. So And that's how we do things here. So if purpose is why we're here and values are what's important to us, then the behaviors are how we deliver on that. So for each behavior, for each value, you would have a number of different behaviors. And what we can do with Carrero is that if you wanted to, for each job role, you could have different behaviors under each value. So again, taking our example of we care, that might look different to me from my perspective. It might be, we care is engaging with our clients, but, care for Steve and the tech guys might be attention to detail. That might be more important. So we can flex the behaviors for individual job roles or levels in the organization. So what a value might mean for somebody on the exec team is maybe quite different to what a value might mean and how we deliver on it for somebody who's, working behind a bar. So again, that's the flexibility of saying, do you know what? As an organization, we're all credible, but what does that look like for each level, or what does that look like for each job role? And often, and again, another way, if you've got a slightly larger organization, you're not starting from, not just the founders deciding how it's going to be going forward, but we would suggest that you get those teams together. So, when we've worked with hotels before, when we've done values launches, it's like, okay, well, these are the values and here are some of the behaviors that we would expect to see from everybody. But how are you going to deliver that in your house, in your team, housekeeping? How are you going to deliver that in your team, IT? How are you going to deliver that in your team, back of house or kitchen? So, that gets people really involved in thinking about, well, okay, yeah, I agree that as a workplace, we are all positive, but what does that really actually mean for my job? And yeah, let me understand how I'm going to be measured on that. So yeah, it's definitely, there's 3 levels: the why, the what's important, and then the how we deliver. Otherwise, I could go around saying, yeah, we care, but that could mean anything to anybody. You have to define it to be able to measure it. Yeah.
So last thing for me is, how do I know when I should revisit my values?
I would say probably, certainly if you're fairly small and growing, I would check in on them at least once a year. So, in our business, in most businesses that I work with that are successful, the SLT teams would get together at least once quarterly. And we personally, our calendar year runs January to December. So our January, sort of our quarterly meeting where we're looking, reviewing last year and looking ahead to next year, we would always just have a quick look at the values and say, do they still all resonate? Do we need to tweak them? So we had, when we started Carrero, there was another person that came with us and worked with us for a while, Tom, and we put together our values based on the 4 of us and him being there. And then when he left, we revisited them again, and we're like, actually, do they still stand? We're now a year in. What do we want them to be? And then we actually tweaked them because we changed quite a lot as an organisation in that point. So don't
Get
be
rid of
afraid
Tom's values.
Sorry?
Get rid of Tom's values.
No, they weren't Tom's values. And we didn't. Yeah, no, that wasn't. Oh, Tom, if you're listening, we love you. He won't be listening. He didn't listen when he was here. So, none of them will listen to me. They hear me enough every day. They're not going to sit and listen to a podcast.
Perfect. I love that. So is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered there in values-led organisations?
No, I don't think so. I suppose it's just to reiterate. I think, as you said at the beginning, it feels a bit scary. You've already got a culture. Why would we bother? There's some research that was done in 2021 that says that nearly 80% of Americans are more loyal to purpose-driven brands. And I think nearly the same. I think it was something like 78% of people are more likely to remember a company that's got a strong purpose. So, when you're talking about wanting to drive customer loyalty, being really, it's not just it's not just for your employees. It can be, if you've got a purpose that works across both your consumer brand and your employer brand, that can be a really, really strong proposition, not only commercially, but also, just that people remember who you are and, want to come back. I mean, Patagonia, is a massive example of that. Everybody knows that they're a great company doing great things, and they're, very, really ethical, and you remember them because of that, because they stand out, and you believe in them as a brand. People want authenticity, and the only way to be authentic is to forget about what everybody else is doing, really look inwards and look about what makes us special, what makes us different, and again, just reiterate that everybody in the business knows exactly why we're getting up in the morning, what's important to us as a business, and knows how to behave when they're there.
Perfect. Superb way to end it. So, as always, quick note to the listener then. So Joe's details will be in the show notes. So if you want to reach out and ask any more questions about creating your values or anything like that, reach out to Joe. Joe, awesome as always. Lovely to see you. Really,
Lovely
really
to see
useful
you.
stuff.
Fab. Catch up soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.